Alright, welcome back to part 2 of this game asset creation series. This is the final part where we will be taking the model into Substance Painter to give it texture, to give it life, to make it something more than a blank mesh. So first you need to, in the top left of Substance Painter when you open it up, File, and then import the mesh. Use a 2048 or whatever texture set you want. I'm using 2048, that's 2K, which will be enough for the mod. Bring that in, and then from here, I'm going to go ahead and start the video. Alright, so you'll be greeted with a view of the model once you do that. I'm going to head down to the bottom left and go to Smart Materials and start looking for a material that I can use for a base for this. At this point, I don't know that I'm going to be making a bone Elven throwing dagger. I'm just looking for some interesting material that I could put on there that I can, again, use as a base and add on to that. This is a bone stylized material that I threw on there and didn't quite like. So right now what we're doing is we're going to texture set settings and we're going to bake the mesh maps at 2048. And we're going to bring in that FBX, the same FBX we exported. And that way, this detail on this high poly mesh will be baked into the texture. So when we apply it to the low poly mesh, we're still going to have all those normals. We're still going to have that AO. We're going to have everything right in the texture map. So once we do that, you can kind of see it changes a little bit, but it's not super noticeable necessarily on this one. It'll be when we apply it to the low poly mesh at the end, you'll be able to see the effect it had. So I'm going to put the bone stylized back on there. And actually, I end up going to substanceshare.com. Link will be in the description below, which is a website where people can share smart materials, brushes, etc. for Substance Painter. They're all free. So I go ahead and head over there and find a smart material that I like. You can filter by type, and specifically, I like for bone. So then you need to drag it into your Substance Painter directory. And here I've already created a fill layer called dirt and then added a black mask and used the dirt brush to sort of start adding in some dirt. So right now I'm doing the same thing except I have a cracks layer. Same thing, it's a fill layer with a black mask, and then on the overlay settings you can change it also in the height settings. If you put it to a negative degree, it'll give it a negative height looking like it digs into the model. And I'm experimenting around right now with some cracks because, well, bone tends to have cracks sometimes. Then on the dirt value, you want to give that a positive height setting because the dirt would actually be extruding from the actual texture. Right now I'm messing around with some of the overlay settings to find something that I like. You can see how it's changing there at the bottom. Also, this footage is sped up ×2 because this is a rather long process, and it really is sort of like painting. You know, yeah, you could follow step by step like you're watching Bob Ross, but at the end of the day, I feel every result will be different. So just watch the general concept and then go on from there. And this program is very similar to Photoshop. So if you have any Photoshop experience, you should be quite at home with texture painting and adding in details. And I'm not great at Substance Painter, so I can't really show you the ins and the outs. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask below, and I can answer if I can. But there are tons of great Substance Painter resources out there on YouTube that can show you how to use the program. So here I'm experimenting with the distancing option up at the top to sort of make my strokes smoother and see what sort of brush I could add in here that would look like the reference image, how it has those sort of engravings that follow the curvature of the knife. And I end up not using this rake. It's the Kyle's rake brush. I end up not using this specific one, but the concept is quite the same. And at any time you can, put these on separate layers from each other so you can independently edit different parts, like all the cracks should be on their own layer, all the dirt should be on its own layer, any blood you add in should be on its own layer, just in case you need to change something later. You don't have to change everything. It'll be much easier. So that's sort of kind of the look I'm going for, but that's not the ultimate brush I end up using. And then I change the symmetry to be on the y-axis, so if I paint on one side, it'll pop up on the other. And that right there is the brush that I'm going for. That sort of adds this rough, calcified bone look that I've been after. Here I'm just using the erase tool on that black mask to get rid of those cracks. So I can, because right now I'm really using this layer as less of a crack layer and more as a grunge layer, so I'm going to rename that. And then coming in here with this this brush and stroking in some of that detail. Now time to add in some more dirt. I'm playing around with different brushes. I don't want to go overboard with it. Really want it to be sort of subtle. So you really got to play around, just figure out what you like. And really it makes sense wherever it's rough is where the dirt buildup would be. Now I'm just adding back in those cracks. I want to add some sort of detail on this flat part up on the top, and I'm experimenting with what that could be. Ultimately, I undid all that and then created a new layer called cracks. Just like I said earlier, keep it on separate layers so you can edit them independently. Now I'm just adding some large cracks. And what I end up doing here is trying to mess around with the opacity and wondering why it's not helping me out here. And what I didn't know, what I do figure out, is that I'm adding the base color opacity up right below the layers tab. You can see it says base color. So ultimately I end up going into the height panel and lowering the height opacity, which is what we're actually seeing here, because you can see when the opacity is, yeah, so there we go. Now I come into the height and sort of make those cracks more subtle because they seem to be overwhelming to the eye. Now coming in here to the base color layer of the bone stylized and simply just changing it up. Messing with the base color value to see what sort of different colors I can get from this material. Also messing with the material actually included a dirt material. Messing with that a little bit too. Now I'm going to test this and export this texture set to where I want it to be. You make sure when on the padding option you pick no padding, no dilation, or else it'll mess up some export stuff. It'll make it really funky. So then with Control-Shift-T on the Prince Build BSDF shader, I just pick all the textures I want to bring in. Just like that, we have, and here's where I scale it in even more. I think I like that look better. Just like that, all of our textures, all of the normal maps, everything is in Blender, and it doesn't look exactly like it did in Substance Painter because we're using a different HDRI and lighting setup. But that was just a test and see what it looked like in Blender. So now I hop back into Substance Painter to make some final touches. I'm really thinking about what could bring this texture to the next level. Sometimes less is more, but sometimes more is more. So checking out the rendering settings in Substance Painter, which is actually what the thumbnail of this series, and all the images, all the renders you have seen were all rendered in Substance Painter and not Blender, and then taken into Photoshop for some color correction. Simply just adding some grunge to really the whole thing is what I ended up doing. Thought it looked better. Alright, I'm going to export our textures one more time because I'm, at this point, done with the mesh, done with the texture. I'm satisfied with where it's at. So we're going to export those textures, make sure we have no padding, pass through, and then export it to our folder. Hop back in Blender, and this is what it looks like with an HDRI in the background of the material preview mode. I'm quite satisfied with this, and satisfied with how it came out. So if you have any questions on anything in this series, please let me know down in the description below. I hope some of you follow along and create a knife just like this, or maybe different. If you do, please share those images with me. I would love to see them. I love seeing people's work when they follow along with any tutorial I make, or just your work in general. So just share it down in the comments below. Message me on wherever, and I'll take a look at it. So thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. This total vert count on the low poly mesh is about 600, so it's going to be quite optimized for the Bannerlord, Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord project we're working on, which is actually, I realized I didn't say anything much about it in the first video. It's actually a Lord of the Rings Tolkien mod, and it's based in the first age of the Lord of the Rings. It's called the Silmarillion. So if you're interested to read more about it, go down in the description below. And there's a ModDB page and a Discord invite. You can hop on our Discord and talk to us. Alright, y'all have a great day. See you in the next one.